Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great day. This is your host, Jamie Clarkson. Let's explore interests without the major. Okay, that doesn't have the same ring to it. But before we start, I want to address the fact that this is the first episode that we are recording after I've announced it to everybody. And I thought that when I would announce it that everybody would just kind of ignore me and we wouldn't get any attention. And I think I was fine with that. But it was met with amazing support from family and friends and Mr. Dostadio, my chemistry teacher from high school. Everybody was so warm and welcoming and awesome, and I'm so grateful for that. So thank you all for listening. I'm very excited to move forward with my new audience. And I also want to address, no, I'm not doing this for a class. Nobody's making me do this at all. I just love podcasts and I love college. So yeah, today's episode is going to be a lot different than some of the other episodes we've had before. I'm not going to have an interview for an hour, and I'm not going to preach at you for 7 minutes. This is going to be more of a conversation, very laid back. I'm here with my friend Spencer. Say hey.
Hey.
It's nice to have you here. Actually, after I announced the podcast, Spencer messaged me like the same day or the day after and was like, I would love to be on you. I'm like, okay. So yeah, we're gonna have a conversation today. And today's topic is a little, it kind of plays into the bonus episode that I recorded before this one about minors. I talked about pursuing a minor instead of pursuing a major if you still want an education in something, but you don't want to commit to the full major. Today we're taking one more step down and we're doing following your interests without having any sort of, education in it in particular. So no majors, no minors, and not any college necessary either. So Spencer, my friend Spencer, he has experience in theater, but theater was never your major.
No. So I actually originally started as an undecided major, but I was going into music ed. So starting at the branch college, they just kind of put me in an undecided major, and they were like, okay, we're going to set you here. And then once your first semester is over and we've gotten a clear indication of what you're going to study, we'll go ahead and start planning what your major is going to be and what specifications you would like to place on it. Mm-hmm. And it was a little bit of a whirlwind just because I was like, this is new and I don't know what I'm doing here yet because I was a first generation college student. So yeah, I was kind of like, in a sense, setting the bar for the other siblings in my family as to what to do for schooling. So I was trying my best to like make sure that when I went in, I did everything correctly and I didn't like... I didn't drop out is what I would put it in terms, which necessarily didn't happen, but I also didn't stay in school. So
yeah, sometimes people just have to take time off and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, that was definitely what it was for me. I needed that time away because as many people know, school is super stressful.
It's very hard.
And it's very hard for everybody to kind of get adjusted to because it's a new environment, new learning situation. So you're trying to readjust your first year of college. But I was also dealing with a lot between the time that I enrolled into school and the time that I started classes. And then also, between the time that I started classes and the time that classes ended.
Yeah.
It's a crazy experience. But it's something that I haven't regretted since I started it. Yeah.
So would you say that pursuing theater just as an interest and as a hobby and as like a passion of yours, do you think that helped with some of the like stress that you were going under, or like did it alleviate any of the stress?
Yeah, actually. So theater for me has always been like a very important aspect of my life. Throughout high school, I was a band student and I was very musically inclined as a kid. But then I also realized that theater was something that I was interested in because I wanted to become an actor. At one point in my life, I was like auditioning for like Disney Channel auditions.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was without the help of my parents because my parents were kind of like, you need to find a real job, like in quotations. But
was it from one of those like radio commercials that are like, take your child to this convention center and get glamour shots?
Exactly. It was a mixture of that and then seeing them online because of course we live in the digital age at that age. So like I was on Facebook at like 13 years old, and it was like, one audition for a Disney show, and I was like, yeah.
Oh my God.
I'd love to. But then I realized that like TV acting wasn't necessarily what I was interested in. I realized that like my real passion was on stage. I wanted to be in live theater, which is kind of what I started doing my freshman year. I needed a fine arts credit. I mean, as a high school student, I was already like 7 fine arts credits deep. So I didn't really need them. Yeah, exactly. It's like I didn't really need them, but I wanted to take the class because I was like, this sounds interesting, and I just want to see where it goes. And to be quite honest, theater is something that like took away a lot of my pain. And my director would always say going into rehearsals, like, when you walk in the door, everything outside of that door is left there. He said when you come into this space, you come into it with an open mind and a fresh mindset, and you also have to come into it knowing that there's room for improvement and there's also room to fall apart. So, you know, it's very much a neutral space for people to go in and be able to experience what theater can be outside of, you know, studying it for school, because it's very different studying it as a major than it is just taking it out as an extracurricular as like a minor.
Yeah.
Theater for me was always an outlet to say like, you know what, I don't like necessarily how like a political campaign is going, or I don't necessarily like how our current office is running. And it was a space for me to go in there and just let the steam off. Yeah. Instead of, you know, doing what everybody else does and just get on Facebook and rant posts for about 5 minutes straight until everybody views it. You know, the usual popularity vote of like, oh, your opinion's like validated because I think the same thing. For me, like I just walked into the space and each day was new. I took notes from the director each day, and like, when I was in there, I didn't worry about anything else, and I was very much like involved in my work. And outside of it, it kind of maintained for a while, but it was like a quick like half hour, like, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay. And then reality started to set back in. And I was like, I gotta get this classwork done, and I also have to go work tonight, and also have to sleep at some point in this week. So it's very much, I feel like it's just a generalization for anybody that like, theater is definitely an outlet, creatively, but also emotionally, because, you know, when you're portraying a character, you have to let out real emotion for people to really be involved in depth in a show.
And I can relate in kind of a different level. So I was never into theater very much, but I was into band, which Spencer, that's how we know each other, is through high school band, actually.
Good old marching band.
Good old marching band. But I chose the path for like my college in particular because I wanted to pursue marching band in college. So that was part of the reason that I chose OU, because I love OU's marching band. And I'm going into my 3rd year of college right now, but for the first 2 years I was in marching band. Unfortunately, I can't be in it this year, but I still have my 2 years of experience. But you know, I did it, and I did it hard, and it's very time consuming. So in a way that's stressful. And every musical group that you join, every university you go to, everything's going to be different. But in my particular experience, there was a lot of stress there, but in the same time it did take a lot of stress away, because like you said that your director would, you know, leave everything at the door. We have kind of a saying that a lot of marching bands have. It's like, leave it all in the field, which in a way means leave all of your effort, leave all of your focus, leave it all in the field. So like, exert yourself to the fullest extent while you're actually doing this. So like, put your whole being into this, put all of your effort, put all of it in it. But at the same time, you know, I could have just had the worst day of classes ever. I could have gotten the worst news. I could have been so frustrated. You know, that kid in my religions class that sits in front of me and pisses me off, he could have just made me so mad that day. And then I could go to band and then do this extremely physical thing. And in a way, it like alleviates that stress, and it takes away that negative emotion. So, you know, there's a give and take. I think going into it, what attracted me to this particular marching band was because it it was so high caliber. That's what I enjoyed about it so much. There are other college marching bands that are like, and there are even bands at the university that aren't marching bands. They're just, you know, ensembles that are a little bit. I'm sorry, we're in like a glass studio, and I'm watching this person parallel park, and it's terrifying.
Oh, I was literally watching the same thing. I watched him pull forward and just back up, and I was like, okay,
oh my
are
God,
you
just got
okay?
so close.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I should focus more, but but anyway, yeah, like I see what you mean as far as like sometimes it's stressful, and then sometimes it's like exactly what you need. It's therapy, and it was nice to have something that wasn't my major, because I tend to go ham on whatever I'm doing at the time, and I was kind of focusing not so much on the journalism thing, because I was kind of like up in the air about like what I wanted to do, so I wasn't really pursuing anything in particular. But I added the women's studies minor, or certificate rather, and I was going very ham on that. I was thinking about it all the time. I would only read like feminist theory books for leisure, and I would watch the documentaries, and I tried to join all kinds of, you know, feminist groups on campus and all that stuff, and I forgot to take time for me. And that was the one thing that I took for me at that time. That's what made sense for me at that time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I would hate if my entire life was musical performance, but I liked that I had I don't know, like 20 hours a week. That was that.
Exactly.
That sounds like a lot of hours.
Exactly. Well, theater is very much a time commitment. Like, for me, when I was in school, I mean, just taking the one performance-based class to be in the show at OUL, you had a class Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 5:30, and then you had a set building class on Fridays afternoons from 11:45 to 3, and then when it gets closer to showtime, I mean, you of course have tech week, and then you have show week. So like our tech week can span anywhere from like 2 weeks to just like a couple days, depending on how the lighting design goes, how audio design goes, and how far we are in set building and where we are memorization wise, you know, lines, music, stuff like that. This past season, we ended up doing a season of all musicals. So we ended my freshman year, spring semester with Next to Normal, and we came to the Athens campus and performed that for alumni weekend. And then we ended up doing Hello Dolly over the summer, which was a huge hit. Everybody loved it. It's really cool. Our summer shows are community based, so we actually include a lot of community members in the show, and we allow for them to be involved, because a lot of the times people assume that our program is just made for college students. Whereas in my certain experience, after my first year of school, I came back the second year as solely community member and performed with them, because the director, you know, he needs guys. I feel like that's a common problem in theater, is like we always need boys.
Yeah.
But I just ended up doing the shows again just to help out, you know, because at that point the entire program had become my family. Everybody that I had been in shows with, the director, any assistant directors that have come into the program at any time, like that's become, you know, my secondary family. I don't really have a close connection, you know, with my first family as much as I used to, but like they've really helped me come a long way since starting school. But theater can definitely like take up a lot of your time, and you have to be kind of conscious of that, because to balance a work life plus a school life plus your social life, you're adding theater life on top of that.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're adding a fourth segment into your schedule when you're trying to balance all four of those. It can get difficult.
Yeah.
And you definitely have to kind of take time out of your day to set aside for yourself, but also set aside for maybe a significant other or friends or family, just to, you know, make sure that everybody knows that A, you're doing okay. It may be stressful at times, but you need to make sure that you as a person mentally and physically are feeling well. But then it's also just like, it's nice to hear from someone familiar saying like, hey, I've been thinking about you lately. A lot's been going on, but I'm doing fine, and I hope you're doing okay as well. Like it's very much a a two-way street. You have to make sure that A, you're doing okay yourself, but B, like you want to make sure that everybody else around you is okay. Because I feel like theater teaches people to be outward and very emotionally extroverted, and that for me like has always been something prevalent in my life. Like I've always been a very extroverted, like emotionally extroverted person. I try to ask people how they're doing all the time, and I want to make sure that people are okay, because nobody likes to be upset all the time,
right?
And like for somebody like me, and even you, like we've been through a lot personally, and like that can take a toll. So you want to just make sure that everything's going well for most. And theater definitely teaches people to be more empathetic, and I feel like that's a pretty decent trait to have as a person.
And for some, having this interest that they pursue like on the side will help with that sense of self-care, but on the other hand, for some people it does sacrifice a lot of self-care.
Exactly.
So for me in particular, and of course you and I can only speak to like our own experience, but for me in particular, part of the reason that I'm not doing band this year is because I do have so much else going on that if I did band, I literally would not have time for myself. And that means cooking myself dinner. That means, making sure my room's clean, making sure that I'm talking to my family and talking to my friends, because 2 years ago I would have been like, free time, I don't care. Like, I don't care about any of that. Like I would rather do band. I would rather do all of these things.
Because it takes away, like the time commitment takes away from the idea that like, oh, I'm fine and I don't have to worry about anything else. But in all reality, like you could literally be falling apart and like,
but you don't have the time to realize that you're falling apart.
Exactly.
And I have seen that with a lot of people, and then they realize once it's too late. It's a lot of people going into college, namely 18-year-old me, like they don't care about time for themselves. They don't think that that's a concern. They think it's frivolous. I thought that it was frivolous. I thought it just didn't make sense. Like, why would I don't know. I can see my friends at band. Like that's, I don't know. Yeah. I had a weird sense of logic that I see with a lot of people, and I just want people to have that in mind before they pursue anything, really.
Exactly. I think for me, like I realized in my second semester of school, and of course like I only had one semester of school behind me, that second semester that I came back as a community member, I realized that like, wow, the time commitment can be an issue sometimes. And like right now I'm taking time off. Like I have talked to Director Jones, and I was just like, I need to take some time for myself, because between working full time and trying to get back into school, because of course I want to continue my education, and I want to make sure that I, Jones always says knowledge is power. Get back into education and look for that strength and the knowledge that more. It's very much like I want to get back into school, and I want to get my degree, and I want to be a successful person, because I feel like that's kind of what we're made for, is like to be the best person that you can be on your own time. Like you have to definitely have the mindset of like, I am okay, and I know that if I do all of this that I will be fine. And whereas like when you first go into it and you realize that like there's a time commitment, you put your time, majority of it into that, and you kind of like say, okay, well, I mean, I can do this at rehearsal, or I can do this at rehearsal when I'm backstage. Like the more times that you say that, the more likely you are to become someone who just like forgets about everything. Yeah. Because that's how I was. Like my classwork started to become affected because I realized like, oh, I can do this in rehearsal. I have rehearsal from this time to this time, and I have free time in that area somewhere. I can, take the time and do it. And was not the case at all. Yeah. Because sometimes classwork can range from taking like 10 minutes to like 2.5 hours to 5 or 6 hours. And you really have to like gauge exactly how you're going to do all of it at one time. Mm-hmm. And it's a difficult thing to go through, and be in something that you love to do and that you're committed to, but also seek time for yourself and other, outside extremities for yourself. It's definitely difficult. And I would say that like for somebody considering going into it, definitely take into consideration the time constraints that you're going to be putting on yourself. And I feel like that goes for a lot of people in a lot of different areas besides performing arts. Like, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, like people in sports, people are very humble and dedicated, and you know, it's a testament to their craft, the way that they rehearse, they perform, they you know, and it's the same way in theater. Like, it's a testament to like how well you're doing in it, the more time that you spend on it. But as an athlete, you also have to realize too that, like, you know, you have to take time for yourself away from it, and grinding nonstop for like 2 days straight isn't always the best option, because you have to take personal care.
And I want to build off of that. Like you mentioned, you and I have experience in this, but only in the performing arts.
Exactly.
So that's what we're speaking to. But when we talk about pursuing your interests outside of, you know, your major, your degree, your whatever, and even without the degree, this can go for art and music and sports, writing, photography, any sort of interest that you have. I mean, it's more than plausible to pursue these things outside of your major, and even far outside of your major. I wrote for like a magazine on campus. It was like a student-run magazine on campus for about a year. And one of the main writers for that magazine, the most consistent writer that we had, was an engineering major. He just enjoyed doing it so much that he kept coming back, and he was really good, and he enjoyed it. And I think what's interesting is having such polar opposites. It gives you some perspective, and like being around people of a different major, because in my experience in particular, outside of, you know, band, outside of my women's studies, let's even include the women's studies thing. You know, when you're in your major, you tend to be around people that are just in that major, and then you don't meet other people, so you don't get perspective. So having, I guess, like a group to go to is always nice. It's always nice. But yeah, and one more thing I want to touch on and discuss a little bit more, because you have experience with this, pursuing your interests outside of college in particular. So, I mean, as far as like joining clubs and student publications, probably can't do that outside of college, but like there are like community theater, like you talked about, community band. I know at Ohio University in particular, there is like a community like concert band that, I mean, just anybody can join, like just anybody, as long as you're like can play an instrument, I guess. And, you know, choirs, church choirs, community choirs, things like that. Yeah, I mean, those are out there.
Yeah, it's a big community. Theater base is definitely like, there's a lot of community theaters out there, especially in the Central Ohio area.
Yeah.
There are several like Facebook pages you can join, like Shameless Production Plugs, and I believe that's one of the pages. And then also I support Live Local Theater. They're a theater page that often promotes Central Ohio shows that are going on and auditions and stuff like that. As of right now, there are a few theaters in Columbus that are actually auditioning for shows. I know Imagine Productions is auditioning for shows. I know that Worthington Community Theater is auditioning. Like, there's several options outside of just studying it for your education for you to be able to participate in theater. And I think that's what's so cool about it, is that the environment for theater is very opening. It's very open and warm, and you're never really met with a cold shoulder. I mean, you're obviously going to have that, like, that one or two people that are just like
right.
They're very introverted, but when they're on stage, that's their time to shine. But when you generally come into a theater, you feel very welcomed, because anybody that comes into a theater, you know, can go on that stage and do whatever they want. Like, that's the whole basis of theater in itself, is spontaneity, and like the idea that theater is supposed to be somewhere where you can let loose emotionally and also let loose just like in general. Like, it's a very chill like atmosphere to be in. For me, I've been in just a few community shows. I was in a production of You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown in New Lex.
Oh, really?
Where I'm from, yeah. And we spent about 7 months on this production.
7 months?
Yes. So,
oh my God.
The backstory to this. So our director cast the show originally with, you know, everybody. So it was about 7 people.
Yeah.
Our about 2 months before we opened, our Charlie Brown and our Linus dropped out. So our two like main lead characters just up and left.
Yeah.
So then we recast the show. Everybody kind of moved around a little bit. I stayed consistent throughout the entire production. I was still the same character. But we pulled people in from the surrounding communities. We just put it out there and we were like, hey, we need somebody to fill these positions. Would anybody like to come in and perform? So we filled it, and the cast was amazing. Everybody was really, really nice. It was performed in a very, very small space. So New Lex has something called the Cavalry Arts Center, which is the community arts center in New Lex and also for Perry County. So they do a lot of like homegrown productions. So a lot of like history-based theater productions will be put on there, just to speak on like the history of the city of New Lex or Somerset or just Perry County in general. We set this entire show up, and the day before we opened, our director was putting up a blackout curtain in front of one of the doorways so we could hide backstage when we weren't on there. And he was on a step stool, and mind you, he's up in his age, and you know, the older you get, the more fragile you tend to be.
I don't like where this story is going.
Yeah, I know. It's very painstaking, but he ended up falling off of the footstool onto a metal stand gate, and
it gets worse.
It does.
It just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, it gets worse. He fell onto it. Nothing happened from the stand gate, but he ended up breaking his leg in 2 places.
Guy.
So the night before our production opened, he broke his leg in 2 places. So like the irony of break a leg coach just kind of broken, and we were all like,
that's
well,
so funny.
So all somebody has to say is the H word, and we're all screwed. Like this show is going down in flames. So we ended up not being able to put the production on. We tried our hardest after he made it to the hospital, and he was in recovery after his surgery. But it took him about a year to get back into to a standing place again. Yeah, and he's still having some issues, I believe, but they're not as intense as they were when it first started. Which we're all thankful. We're all very blessed that he made it through that whole progress, because it was a journey. It definitely was an intense moment for all of us.
So did you end up doing the show at all?
Didn't.
You didn't?
No, we put all this work into it.
Sucks.
Yeah, it did kind of suck at first, but I realized that in theater this happens a lot.
Yeah.
People get injured, people lose their voice, people the saying "the show goes on" can apply to every situation, but some situations end up not happening. So it's very much it's difficult in times to be able to say theater can be fun, but it can also be very stressful. And it also ties in with the whole time management thing. When you're on a time crunch to put a show on in about 4 months, you tend to speed the process up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it can definitely affect the production and how it runs smoothly, I guess, in a sense. For us in general, for that show, it was really difficult because 4 out of the 7 cast members had been in the show since the beginning. So we casted it in August of 2017, and we didn't end up being able to put the show on until February of 2018. Oh my God. Yeah, and by the time it had hit, he had broke his leg, and we tried so hard to put that show back on just for him. Yeah. Just out of spite of what happened, and we ended up not being able to do it, which sucks because it's an amazing show. Kristen Chenoweth was in it in the 1999 original broadcast or Broadway cast, and she was nominated for Best Female Actress, and it's an amazing show. It has a really deep meaning, and it also ties in the classic Peanuts characters, and it just would have been a good show to put on. But again, in community theater, things can happen, and but there's definitely opportunity for everybody to join in and have fun either way, because we could lose a lead one day and we need somebody to step in.
Yeah.
And that's the gift of community theater, is that anybody can do it no matter what background or anything. You could literally have no theater experience, but you can keep a tune and you can get up there and dance a little bit. You're in the cast.
Or if you have the capacity to be taught.
Yeah, if you have the capacity to be taught, you're definitely in the cast. And
oh my gosh.
It's an insane ride that theater can take you on.
Yeah. Everybody that I know who's done community theater, it just loves it.
Oh,
just
it's so much
loves
fun.
it.
Because it becomes a family. Like,
Yeah.
you spend 4 to 5 to 7 months together, and like, you just become very close. But in the same rate, you also can become very agitated with the same
Yeah.
people that you're with all the time, because
Yeah.
you know, it's literally like moving in with a roommate. The first couple months are very, very rocky, because you're both learning how to readjust to one another and like be comfortable in the same living space. And it's basically the same thing in theater. Like, you have to become a very comfortable person with other people, because you're learning these people at the same time. But by the end of the majority of the shows, everybody is very close. We're all friends, and we all maintain that friendship outside of theater. And that's another great thing about being in shows, is like, you make tons of friends.
Yeah.
And these are people that are like-minded in interest. So it just becomes a very cool path that you to take. And theater can take you anywhere. Like, I started at OUL. Going into it, I didn't realize like what theater could be, because in high school, theater isn't as like professionally taken. It's very like, it's an extracurricular. So, you know, you come to rehearsal after school for a couple hours, and then you put on a show a couple months later. With college theater and community theater, it works different, because you have a lot more of a commitment to go into, and you realize that there are time constraints, and you also realize that you have to plan everything according to like when everybody's schedules align. Can also be very difficult, but it can pay off at the end. And I think that's what's most important for people to realize, is like, it may be stressful, it may cause some anxiety attacks here and there, and like, you may just get stressed out, but the end goal, putting that show on for people and seeing people's faces lights up in the crowd when you start to perform, is just like one of the best feelings. During Next to Normal, anybody that knows the show of Next to Normal, it's a very intense, emotionally. It's crazy. Basically, the backstory of the show is it's a family where the wife, the main character Diana, she is dealing with mental disease and mental disorders. So she is dealing with bipolar depression, and she has hallucinations. Not to give too much away, but it's very much a show that is deep and intense emotionally, and people try to unwrap that. And during our run of the show, my character has had a very pivotal moment in Act 2, where he realizes, like, you know, this person that he loves may be going down a really rough path, and he tries to, you know, pull that person out of that, because you don't want to watch one of your friends or your loved ones go down a path that, you know, may not suit them at all. And he just has a very like revolutionary moment where he's like, I can't stop this person from doing what she wants, but I can try and help prevent it. And he becomes very empathetic towards her, and realizes that, like, as much as he wants to just be done with it, he just has to kind of move forward with the idea that, like, you know, he loves this person, and he doesn't want to watch this person go anywhere. So he just kind of has to say, like, gotta stick with her, and whatever happens, happens. And they end up together at the end of the show. But it follows Diana's story of, like, how she deals with mental illness, and her treatment of, or her round of treatment, and how her daughter deals with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and how the husband is dealing with his issues, as well as trying to help his wife. And then, of course, there is a fourth character in the family, that is the son, but he's again, not trying to give away too much, but he's no longer there. So it's a very intense show to break apart. And watching audience members in a show is something that I like to do. I like to see people's emotions and how they're reacting to it. And that show is it's very much a heavy cry show. Like, there were a lot of tears being shed. And the joy of theater is, like, for me at least, is watching those people react emotionally, because as an actor, you want to be able to say that, like, when I'm on stage, people can feel what emotions I'm putting off. Most cases that can't be true because, you know, you never know because you're on stage, and that's what the director is there. That's what the director is there for. Like, he's there to say, like, okay, that was good, but I know that you can do a little bit better. And they pull out the best in you, and that's gonna be helpful when it comes to showtime and, like, knowing whether the audience is understanding what's going on during the show. And it was just it's I'm sorry that
No,
I kind of spiel on it, but, like,
it's nice to see that you're passionate.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a very like intense place to be, and theater has just shown me that, like, being emotional and extroverted with your emotions isn't a bad thing at all. Like, you should be able to say as a person, like, I can emotionally, like, put things out there for people to see because I want them to understand that, like, this is how I'm feeling. Because a lot of people can struggle with that, the idea of not being able to feel comfortable with explaining how they feel. And I think that, like, theater is a good outlet for people to be able to say, like, you know what, I hate being this closed off with my emotions. Like, I'd rather just be able to put them out there and say, you know what, I want help, like, to either stop feeling like this or, like, to either start feeling a certain way. And, like, that's what I learned from my experience there. Was, like, I learned that I don't have to hide how I feel about things, and I also don't have to hide certain parts of me that I don't feel like I want people to see. And it's a very intense place to be, but it's also super fun and just enjoyable to kind of go through. But, like, again, to tie it in with, like, the whole major thing, it's not necessarily something you have to, like, be in school in to be passionate about and to have an understanding of. Everybody has their own experience, everybody has their own path that they go on, and whether that be you going into school for something like theater or you just doing it on the side for fun, it could take you anywhere.
So I just want to circle around really quick back to before you were a community member and you were still a student doing like student productions. I hear that you were able to take some of your work to a larger stage. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So the fall semester of my first year of college, we took a show called Moon Over Buffalo to KCACTF, which is the Kennedy Center American Theater College Festival.
Where's that at?
It's Region 2, which is the region that OU would be in. That is placed in several different areas. So when we went, it was in Pennsylvania. I know this past year it was in New Hampshire. So it changes every year, I believe. But we ended up being an invited production. So we had a scout from the Kennedy Center American Theater College Festival come to one of our performances. And he just took notes the entire time, watched the entire show. And then at the end, he gave us the notes back. And we just waited to see whether or not we made it to Kennedy Center. And we got the call, and they were like, awesome. Hey, you guys made it, and we want you to come and be an invited production. So to plan for that, it was pretty difficult just because it was my first year of college. So I was like, oh my God, I'm doing things. Like, I'm a freshman in college, my first semester, and I'm literally already going to a national competition.
I can relate, oddly enough.
Right. It's intense to be like, I'm a new student and I'm already going places. Like, what's happening here? But when we took the show, we were there for a week. So I believe it was like the week before my birthday, which would have been like the third week in January. We took it to Pennsylvania. So we literally packed up all of our set. We packed up lighting equipment. We packed up sound equipment. We packed up costumes, makeup, like all of the stuff that we needed to go. Literally took our entire set and took it across 2 states and set it up on a different stage.
Was it weird to perform on a different stage?
Yeah, actually. So the stage that we performed on is much larger than the one at OUL.
Okay.
OUL stage is a decent size. It's a decent sized stage.
Yeah.
The theater seats about 300 people on average, but this theater sat about 1,000 because it had a balcony, and then it also had like the floor seating. It was completely different because, so for our theater, our booth is above. It's upstairs. So like you have to go up a set of stairs to actually get into our booth. But it looks into the theater, so you can of course see everything that's going on stage. This booth was in the theater we performed in, the booth was in the middle of the audience. It was called a floor. It's called a floor booth. So they literally sit like dead in the middle of the audience, and they run the show from about midway back from the stage. So you see everything that's going on, but everything that we did while we were there was student setup. Besides running ropes and stuff like that backstage to drop electricals for lighting and bars to put up different set pieces. So that was all run by the theater staff that was there. They were available to us during that time to set up anything we needed help with, anything that needed fixed while we were there, just in case anything broke on the travel over. Because we did take a 23-foot U-Haul truck and just shoved all of our stuff into it.
Yeah.
And plus the night that we packed, it was snowing. So, I mean, it literally just snowed like at least 2 inches, and we finally put the final like TV flat in the top of the truck, and we shut it, and we were like, let's go home. It's cold, we're all tired, and it's like really late at night, so we just need to get out of here.
That's really cool that you guys were able to do that.
It's intense. And for us being a regional campus, like I was scared to see how like what the process would be like, just because most colleges that were there were like major colleges. So like Youngstown was there. There were colleges from around the area that we were in. So Region 2 includes 11 states. Yeah. So it's Ohio, or like a portion of Ohio, then like West Virginia and like Indiana, that area. As far as I know, I don't want to misquote anything, but we like, I'm not too sure, to be quite honest. It's an experience that I remember, but it was very quick paced. Yeah. So like Kennedy Center, while you're there, it's supposed to be a fun experience. So like the whole week that you're there, it's supposed to be workshops, and it's going to be performances from invited productions and stuff like that. So one of the ones that really stuck out to me was Youngstown did Dead Man's Cell Phone, which is a very, very popular play. And it was really intense, but they did it in a black box theater, so it was just a stage on like a bottom platform, and then the levels of like seating just went up into the back wall. Yeah. So we went and saw that performance because everybody had, like, it was a requirement for us. Like everybody had to be at every single invited production performance. Oh, okay. Like we had to be there to see them, to see like what else the Kennedy Center brought in and had to offer. And they were incredible. The actors in that show were just absolutely insane. The actresses in that show were absolutely insane. Everything went very smoothly. Like their scene changes were really nice, and there's a very pivotal scene towards the end of the show. One of the characters has this very long monologue. It's one of the male actors has a very, very, very long monologue at the end of the show. And usually there's like a ballet scene after it, like a whole dance sequence. But they ended up not doing the ballet sequence and then just doing that end scene. But what made it fun was that they incorporated that dance element into the show by doing the scene changes in different stylized dances. Okay. So like one was a jazz, one was like a 1940s noir, like sneak around agent kind of deal, and one was like a 70s and 80s. Like it was very intricate, and like it was cool to see the amount of effort that people were putting into that show and other shows. There was a college that did Waiting for Godot, which is a very intense show. I kind of touched on how Kennedy Center is like a workshop center the entire week. For me, I did one of the workshops, which was doing stage managing. So I was learning how to be a stage manager and what that job requirement was. I missed the entire first act of Waiting for Godot because I was trying to get all of my information for all of my actors from the casting director and the director of this 10-minute play that I was putting on during Kennedy Center. So like a lot of my time while I was there was taken up by doing that. But I wouldn't have changed it for the world because I learned so much while I was there. Being in invited production, we had a different experience than most people because being like with an invited production, it was time consuming. Like theater most times is time consuming. But like we had rehearsals almost every day during the week. Other than when we were all off doing our own things for workshops. When it came time, we were the very last show to perform during the week. So by the time our show came up, majority of the people that were attending this festival had already left. Because a lot of them lived out of state, so they were all like heading back with their shows to put them away and get them taken care of. But we ended up setting up our show the day of our performance. Another school was putting on their performance at noon, and then our show was at 2:00.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, we have to hurry.
Right.
like the theater next door was literally running a show, and like we're over here setting everything up, and it was rough for a while, just because the morning that we woke up of our show, our lead had lost his voice. Like completely lost his voice, and we were
Have you ever had a show that like went right?
Well, yeah, I've had a few.
A couple.
Every show comes with its the territory of like being kind of difficult, but for it being that big of a like a performance, it was terrifying to be like, our lead can't talk, what do we do? Like, so we tried every remedy in the book. We gave him honey tea with lemon, and like we tried to pump him full of medicine the entire time. But he went on stage and performed, and he may not have had his voice fully there, because a lot of the character decisions for his acting were based off of voices. He's a very, very, very talented actor who does a lot of different voices, accents, and he's very articulate. Which is not something that I can say for myself.
We all have our strengths.
Oh, exactly.
And our weaknesses.
Don't I know? But he was very much like a play actor. I don't like to say that like every actor is like a different segment, but like he very much liked to do plays, and like there wasn't a lot of music in it. Whereas I'm a musical theater person. I love to be on stage and singing and dancing and acting like a complete idiot at all times. But that whole experience was just intense. Especially for somebody who's just starting college. Like I literally had just started school that semester, and then like we were already casting for Next to Normal in the process of going to Kennedy Center. So like we were like audition, rehearsal for the next day, auditions again, callbacks, rehearsal. Then we went into starting to pack, to put everything in the truck to go. Like we literally, I remember like preparation for to take it to Kennedy Center. We boxed off a 23-foot area in our set building, like in our shop, and we literally just packed all of our set pieces and stuff like that into that 23-foot area just to see if we could get it all in.
So it sounds like even though it's not everybody's like major and it's not everybody's focus, it's still high caliber and it's still pretty high stakes.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just like a throwaway thing. There is still a lot of effort to put into it.
Yeah, you're definitely, when you're in theater, you're definitely putting a lot of effort into it, and you're more likely to be I guess in a higher caliber. You're more likely to be in a higher caliber, especially when working with a director that is as passionate about theater as you are. Director Jones is okay. I'm sorry. The man has changed my life. Like when I went into school, to be completely honest, like I was very irresponsible. I did not listen to people very well. I just didn't take direction from others very well. I'm a very independent person. Like I just took everything on my own accord. And when I started doing theater there, like Jones showed me how to be a team player, how to show up on time. And he opened doors for me that I never thought I would be able to open for myself. Like going to Kennedy Center was a highlight for me, because I'd heard of Kennedy Center once or twice before I went. And then when we finally got the call that like we were going as an invited production, I cried. I was like, oh my God, this is crazy to be happening to me, because theater was never like an intended like thing for me. I was always wanting to go into music education. I mean, I was going into pre-med. I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist. Like I wanted to work with kids in cancer, and like my entire idea of what I wanted to do with school just changed in a matter of a semester. And Kennedy Center was a part of that like whole experience. And it's been a whirlwind for me. And I guess I'm sure I could attest for some of my fellow actors in the show that like Kennedy Center was a stressful time for all of us. Like when we didn't have free time to like go out and do stuff and like see workshops and just like experience the space that we were in, it was very much like rehearsal, everything has to be right, everything has to be pinpoint exact, and like some of the aspects didn't always get to a pinpoint exact, but that comes with the territory of the spontaneity of being in a show. Like anything can happen while you're on stage, especially if it's rehearsed and something messes up. Like ad-libbing is something that happens all the time in shows.
Yeah.
Like if a character misses a line, most likely another character will rebound it by ad-libbing something and reminding the character of what their line is. Because as an actor, like you're not only memorizing your lines, you're also memorizing everybody else's lines. Mm-hmm. So you definitely like you have to be a team player and like know how to work well with others. And Jones showed me how to do that. And sorry, I don't want to be emotional. He means a lot to me. The man like he's just become like a father figure at this point. Like mm-hmm. He's an incredible person with just an insane amount of love in his heart for what he does and the people that he does it with. And I don't think I could have asked for a better like first year college experience than what I had with him, because I made a whole family of friends just from being in the program. And like when I first went into it, my first audition, everybody was okay. So audition processes can be very different depending. The audition process for OUL is depending on like how he wants to run it. It could either be an open audition where everybody comes in at one time and we all just kind of play with each other. Like for a farcical comedy, that's the best way to cast a show. Yeah. Is you bring everybody in at one time, you see how everybody works together, how everybody acts together, what chemistry other people's have, and from that point you can go from there. Whereas like Next to Normal, it was you come in for an individual audition, you sing a song, you sing your audition song, like what you would pick, and then he usually asks you like, do you want to sing anything else? Is there any other songs that you think I should hear before you go? Because you have about a 10-minute space for auditions. And then once that's done, he'll pull you in for callbacks, and that's when the partner work starts to see like who has chemistry with who. And it's just it depends very much on like what the show is like, on how auditions work, and it's a process, and you definitely have to be like, you have to be in the moment and also know how to work with people well, and you have to be able to cooperate with your director, because you know, like sometimes you won't agree with some things that the directors say, but you have to realize that like he's putting on this show or she's putting on this show, and they have a vision of what they want the show to look like, and like it may not be necessarily in your mind what you think is best for the show, but in that moment, if that director sees like that's what's best for his vision or her vision of that show, you have to follow that. And 9 times out of 10, it ends up being the correct decision as to what happens. And I feel like a lot of people kind of forget that sometimes because we get so, you know, self-involved. We're all like, I'm an actor.
This is my art.
Yeah, this is my art. This is my legacy that I'm making. And you're like, honey, you're literally on stage. Like somebody is telling you what you're doing at all times. Like that is literally the point of the director. And like Jones is not only the artistic director, but he's also the producer of the shows. Like he produces, he directs, he builds set, he helps with lighting. Like he literally creates the vision of what he wants for these shows, because he is the artistic director. Like he has that ability to be like, you know what, I want this here, this here, this here, and I want these lights and these lights, and then it looks beautiful. And like I think that's what's so incredible about him, is that he has this vision that just like is untouched by anybody. Like it's very much I always say this, like it's very much like a vaudevillian style theater, but with elements of like modern. It's just crazy. And I think vaudevillian kind of ties in with the whirlwind word, because it's like vaudevillian's very like loud, fast, funny. Like that's all you have to do in vaudevillian theater for people to be like, that's great. Like that is amazing acting. So like farcical comedies, vaudevillian acting, they go hand in hand. So Moon Over Buffalo was definitely like a great show, whereas Next to Normal still kind of had that feeling, in certain times, but it was also very emotionally intense at others. So it fluctuates, and I think that's he's great at being able to balance his taste and also taking in consideration student taste. So like one of our recent graduates, Alexandra Downhour, she comes to main campus, takes some classes here because she was majoring in theater, and she actually graduated this past spring, and she was a consultant for the entire season, like for Drowsy Chaperone, and then also for Jekyll and Hyde, and now she was a consultant for Legally Blonde the musical, which sadly just closed this past week.
I know, I didn't get to see it. I'm so sad about that.
It was a wonderful show, and that was a community theater show, so we had a lot of talent from Columbus areas come in. So like we had a girl from Hilliard there, R.L. Woods. Like she was from the Columbus area. Our Callahan, he was from Short North. So like a lot of people from the Central
that's really
Ohio
cool
area.
that people are like traveling, because that's like
it's a decent commute.
Yeah, it's like an hour or so.
Yeah, it's about an hour, especially from downtown.
Yeah.
We had a girl from Upper Arlington.
Wow.
Yeah, she drove. I feel like
that's crazy.
A pretty decent.
I feel like they would have like a really good community theater up in Upper Arlington.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
a lot of this outside talent came from Central Ohio, and like it drew in a lot of people from different areas of the state.
That's really
to
awesome,
come and see
because,
the show.
Like, you get a mix of like different experience.
Yeah, so it was crazy. So I was in the production for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I had to take a personal leave of absence. I was having some family issues that I needed to make myself available for. So I left the production, but I still had a very deep connection with everybody there. Because, you know, when you start a show out, like the experience is a little different because everybody's kind of getting used to each other and just trying to figure each other out. And I think I left right around the point where everybody was starting to like understand everybody else. Like we all had the ideas of like who we were and what we were doing. But like I still like can genuinely say that like I love everybody that was in that show. Like every single person, between people that were coming from Columbus that I had never met before to people that like I had known for, you know, 2 to 3 years plus. Like it just, they become your family. And that show was definitely special because of all of the talent that came out for auditions. I remember doing, because I was a stage manager, so like, sorry, I can't speak. I was a stage manager. I was one of the 2 that was originally brought into the production, and I didn't get to watch any of the auditions, but I got to meet everybody beforehand and like warn them up a little bit, let them know like, hey, it's okay. You've been on auditions before. You're gonna be fine. Like, just go in there and do what you do best, and like you'll have a great time. And I think that still holds true to a lot of the cast members that were in the show. I feel like even after their auditions, they were kind of wary just because it was new people. You know, they always have that trepidation of like whether or not you're gonna get along with everybody.
So what are some of like the roles that just like anybody can just do? Like you were talking about like acting and stage managing and whatnot. Like what are some of the roles that people can fill?
So there are a decent amount of roles in theater that you can go into. I know a lot of theaters in Columbus, especially bigger theaters like the Palace or the Ohio Theater. Like they have like marketing teams that actually sit down and like do all of this planning, social media and also media wise in general, to let people know what shows are coming into their theater, what national Broadway tours are coming into their theater, like that they bring in and they generate revenue based off of that. There's several different places you can go in theater. Production staff is definitely a fun experience. Like stage managing is part of production staff. You could be an artistic director, you could be a creative director, you could be a vocal director, a choreographer, you could do dramaturgy, which is just making sure the plot line holes are filled, just making sure everything is like cohesive together, whether that's gender of a character or that's character's motivation or where's the plot line going after this, like if a pivotal moment happens, like where will the plot line turn to after that. or you could just do something as simple as being a stagehand. Like you could be backstage pulling ropes, making sure characters have certain props, costumes. You could help be a costumer. You could do design costumes.
There's a
build.
ton of stuff.
Theater is a very, very large area that you can cover. And I think that's what's so cool about being like a community member, but also being like in school, is that you learn about all of those different areas and you also get experience in those doing shows. Like for me, I always thought I was just going to be on stage. I was like, I'm always just going to be on stage. I'm going to be an actor, even if that's like ensemble or if that's principal rolling. And then like when I started at OUL, it changed. Like I wanted to do production staff. I wanted to start doing stage managing, and I wanted to help vocal direct. I may not be the best at the piano, but like like I can attempt. But I feel like it's kind of a requirement to be a vocal director. So you have to know how to play some form of instruments to make sure everybody can stay on track. But there's also like dramaturgy would be fun. I feel like dramaturgy mainly relies on like when you're writing a show. A lot of shows don't have plot line holes when they're being published for people to use in public use. Like licensing companies usually will be like, this show's kind of new and there's still some writing issues, so it needs edited, and then we'll put it on our website. Like, but dramaturgy is definitely like a fun option, I feel like, to do. You could also be casting, like do casting directing, which is where you literally just sit down and you cast a show with like the creative director, vocal director if you're doing, a vocally demanding show, or a choreographer if you're doing like a dance heavy show. Yeah. I feel like that would be a fun job too, to just kind of like be able to sit down in an audition and watch all these talented actors and actresses, these young people come in and do what they do best, and place them where you see fit, or like where your creative director sees fit, because you obviously want to include everybody's opinions before you decide to just sit down and cast a show by yourself. It's definitely like, again, teamwork. You have to be a team player a lot of the times. I've worked in a decent amount of the areas, not professionally, but usually just like on the side for fun. Stage management was definitely something that I just did for fun. I haven't done anything professionally with it yet. But like acting is the same way. Like I haven't done acting professionally, but like I feel like I'm doing it professionally just because of the caliber of like what these shows are. Like Jones, like his productions are just insanely like intricate. Everything's just very like, it's very put together. And considering the man literally like he builds his sets with students, he casts his shows with students sometimes, with community members. Like he literally will bring in people to like help cast shows sometimes, just in case he needs that. Most of the time he's by himself, just because I feel like he has a pretty decent understanding of his actors and he knows where people can fit and where they can go. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity in theater outside of just being on stage and singing and dancing and acting, especially in production, and marketing is definitely another big one that you can go into. For me, like when I return to school in the spring, I'm still going to be an undecided major because I will be on a probation until I get back out into the world. But I want to major in communications, and I want to have a focus in theater and marketing, just so I have that background. So I know like one side of it, which would be like being on stage, production stuff and stuff like that, but also the other side of it, which would be like generating revenue, making money off of shows, making sure that you have enough to cover the cost of the show. Like, because when you license a show, you have to pay for the rights, and you have to also take into consideration how much money you're going to be spending on like building the set, especially if you don't have like the materials that you already need to build a set. But you also have to like consider paying, employees and stuff like that, because there are student employees that work for the theater that like come in and spend their extra time to make money, to help put these shows on. So there's a lot of effort behind the scenes that people don't really realize until, like somebody points it out. They're like, hey, well, this guy did all this. And then finally that recognition comes in. But theater is definitely a very open area for everybody to join in.
And okay, we only have a couple minutes left of this episode, and I know we wanted to talk about we wanted to touch on at least deciding whether or not college is for you.
For you,
Yeah. Do you want to start us off?
Sure.
It's a big old question.
Big old question. Yeah. So, for me, when I graduated high school, I was still dealing with a lot mentally. I had gone through some pretty like traumatic things between graduating high school and like starting my senior year of high school. So like at that time, I don't think I was ready for it. Like mentally at least, I didn't think I was ready to go into school. But I was afraid to say that because, you know, as a first generation college student and as somebody with parents like that are as they're very passionate about things and they want me to do well. They kind of pushed me to go to school. And I was afraid to say no because I was like, if I say no, they're literally going to like be like, bye,
Right.
Have fun, like living in a box. Like it's scary sometimes because you think of like the worst possible scenario and then like play it out in your head and you're like, I'm not going to do that just because I don't want this to happen. Like it has the possibility because, you know, like if you think it, the universe usually just brings it into your life at some point.
Yeah.
So for me, like, when I started school, I thought it was the right decision. I was like, this seems like a great idea for me. I mean, like, I want to get my education and I want to get it done fast and I want to get out quickly. So I'm just going to, you know, do what I can do. And then if anything happens, like, I just have to deal with it. So, like, between dealing with everything mentally and then also having the stress of schoolwork and then also having the stress of theater because that's a literal separate life you're adding on top of classes. It just became a lot and I realized that like halfway through my fall semester that I wasn't going to make it after my first year because I'd given up. Like there were some days I'd have anxiety attacks so bad I would have to sit in the car and like not go in the class because I knew that if I went in public like it would just get worse. Yeah, it would just get worse. Yeah. So like I just tried to do what was best for me at the time and it wasn't the right decision. I can say that, you know, like wholeheartedly, like knowing that it really wasn't the right decision for me at the time. And I'm okay with that now. I've kind of come to terms with the idea that like, you know, I may have flunked out of my first year of college, but like
who hasn't?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it's such a common thing nowadays. No, it's one of those things where like I realize that I may have done it, but I still have opportunity to improve from that area because there's only so far you can go until you hit rock bottom. Right. So once you hit rock bottom, you can go literally anywhere from there. So like I realized it was time for me to say, you know what, we're just gonna take some time off for ourselves, work, get some money up, and then when I feel that I'm ready physically and mentally to come back into school, then I will. Yeah. And I feel like that's what a lot of people should do is before you decide to, you know, start applying and start, you know, re-enrolling for classes, like take the time to sit down and think, am I in the right headspace to be taking classes, to be putting in that time commitment at this moment in my life? Like, am I going to be comfortable taking classes and also, you know, working and just maintaining a usual life?
And I want to emphasize the, like, is it right for me right now? Because there's nothing wrong with taking a couple of years off, like even before you start, or maybe once you start and then you realize that you need time for you. There's no shame in taking that time off, and even if you just decide straight up it's not for you, that's perfectly fine too. I know lots of people who, you know, decided to call it quits after a couple of years and then pursued something else and they're perfectly happy, you know. And there's a lot of pressure on kids to, like, you know, you're 18 years old, you need to figure it out right now. Like, do you want to join the military? Do you want to go in the workforce? Do you want to do school? Like, and this is like one of the biggest questions that you will literally ever be asked in your life.
It's like playing Skyrim and you're trying to choose exactly what build you're going to play.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh my God. Okay.
I have no idea.
Well, that reference didn't really work.
No, I bet that would be a reference for Max. But,
Oh yeah. No, Max, if you're listening, you know what I'm saying. When in Skyrim, you're choosing what kind of class you're going to play. That's definitely like.
I don't even know if he plays Skyrim. I'm just kind of assuming.
No, it's like. in the game Skyrim, like you have to choose like a class that you're gonna play. So like whether you're gonna be like an archer, or you're gonna play like
like D&D,
like one-handed, yeah, kind of like that.
Oh, okay,
in that sense,
you got me.
Yeah, I got you. There we go. We're tying it together. No, it's definitely like that in the sense of like you're literally starting your life, and at 18 years old, it's kind of scary because you're like, I just became an adult like yesterday,
and like not even real, like legally, but
legally,
mentally,
no.
I don't know.
No.
No. Have you ever met an 18-year-old that's an adult? Like, no, you haven't. And it's like this huge, massive decision. I wish it was more normal to take time off, because if it were more normal, I think I might. Well, I don't know if I would have done that for myself. I don't know.
I feel like in a lot of cases, the pressure that people put on you to get into school, like right off the bat, is more, it's more enticing for you to get into school than it is for your own personal pressure to be like, hey, you got to get in now. Like, it's that idea of like peer and family pressure that like pushes on you, that says like, you have to get into school. When in all reality, like, you can take a year or two off in between high school and college to get yourself together before starting school, because it's a heavy commitment that you can't take lightly.
And on top of that, a lot of people who justify going straight into school or straight into grad school or straight into whatever, they'll be like, I know if I don't do it now, I'll never go back. I think that says something.
Yeah.
That really says something.
Really
like,
does.
do you really want to do it if it will be that big of a hurdle for you to jump through?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you want to put it off, like if it really matters to you, you can put it off for a year and then you can go back just fine. So I don't know. I
feel like there's a difference between going back to school and being successful, and going back to school and being not successful.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely a gray area where you can like end up in either or.
Yeah.
Like I feel like for most students, it's tough to like go into school and do well for yourself, and then like say, you know what, I'm not in a good place to be doing this right now. I need to take some time for myself. But then there's also the pressure of being like, oh, I was doing really well and I probably shouldn't stop because I feel like I'm gonna keep doing well. When in all reality, like you could go back into school next semester and literally fall out. Like
right. It's like you need to always
matter.
be putting on that. College.
College is just
what a wonderful place to end today. Oh my god, we ended
it.
with about an hour and 12 minutes.
Hey, I mean,
before we start recording, I'm like, I'm shooting for like a half hour.
Yeah, a half hour, 45 minutes, and now we're like, it's about an hour, and we're just.
Oh my god.
It's nice to sit down and have this conversation because people don't really talk about it that much.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely I don't know why I'm saying this, but there's definitely a stigmatism around like taking time off from school and working and getting out there and getting into the workforce before you get your degree is never a bad thing.
No,
like,
it just gives you more money to get
the degree.
degree.
Exactly. You're putting that money into funding your tuition, but also funding, like your life in general. Like for me, I mean, I work full-time hours, but I still try to participate in things outside of just working because I want to keep myself involved. Because the longer you keep yourself
because you're still
involved,
a person, you're not just a cog in the machine.
Exactly, a cog in the machine. Yeah, the more that you stay involved, the more likely you are to become better and more focused in that area. And I feel like that was really heavy for me in theater. Like I realized that, like if I take time away from this, I'm literally going to forget everything.
Right.
Like right now I'm having that kind of dilemma where like every normal, student does, I just sing show tunes around my apartment all day. So like when I just sing these show tunes, like it reminds me like, wow, I haven't really been on a stage in almost 2 semesters. And it's hard because it's your passion. It's what you're really like, you really want to do with your life. But at the same time, you have to like, I sit back and realize like, it's good for me to take time away from this.
Yeah.
Because I can finally figure out everything that I want to do with myself and then like take off from there. Like the time that you take to figure yourself out is the time that you need to take to be able to find like what is right for you. And that is like something that should be important and should be talked about with college, is like what you do here dictates what you're going to do outside of here.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times that can be true, but it also can be true because people go back to school after so long to either get their master's degree, or like if they're interested in another section, they get another bachelor's degree. Like nothing says that it's stopping you from coming back and doing it all over again.
Yeah.
You can have the same experience you had your first year in your second time going back. And I feel like it's kind of like FOMO. Like everybody's like, there's a fear of missing out, and like you shouldn't have that fear of missing out, because this is an opportunity that's always at your back door when you need it.
What a lovely way to end it. You just blew a kiss. All right, well, I guess that concludes our second bonus episode of Let's Find Your Major. Thank you guys so much for listening to this chill, laid back episode. If you want to send me any requests, any questions, any comments, feel free to. I have an email, letsfindyourmajor@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and on Twitter @findyourmajor. If you want to follow me, your host, Jamie, I am on Instagram @Danny Clarkson, DANNICLARKSON, or you can follow me on Twitter @NotReallyDanny, DANNI. LOL. But
just full Bella Thorne.
Oh my god. Oh god. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.